All right, George Couros. How's it going, sir?
Hey, what's up?
Living the dream
I don't know about living the dream, but
down in Florida? I mean, I feel like that seems like living the dream to me.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you, as someone who spent 47 years of his life in Canada, if I never see snow again, I'll be fine.
Okay, really? I think I'd miss it, but
it's funny because my mom, she's an immigrant from Greece to Canada, and when I told her I was moving, I'm the baby in the family, so I thought there's going to be like this. How could you leave me? How dare you move away and stuff like that? And so she I think she came to Canada. Maybe she was like 25ish around there. And she said to me, she goes, like, I've basically spent like almost 60 years here, and I've never got used to the cold. Can I like come visit you? I'm like, you come whenever you want. So she was like, this is a vacation for me. So I've seen my mom more in the last 2 years than I probably saw her the 10 years. She's like, she just comes here and visits all the time. She had no interest in seeing me before, but now I'm cool again to her. So,
it's like you've got the exotic landscape.
Like, yeah. So I think it's like the weather, I think too in, I know you were in northern Alberta, and I wasn't as far as you. The light being from like 4 a.m. to where we were to 11 p.m.
Yep.
I didn't mind that, to be honest with you.
It was hard.
It was the dark. It was the dark. That's where, and so I, probably had some like seasonal depression. Didn't even know it. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's kind of around the same time all year here. Like it's, we're like a little bit. It's probably within an hour or two. So it is, it's just different. And I remember saying when, if I ever move to a warm climate, like I'm going to run all the time. And, a lot of people say stuff like that and then they get the opportunity, but I actually run all the time now. So it's something I really love doing. I'm not good at it, but I love doing it. So.
And that's what I've always found too. Cause I've dabbled in running. I said, a few years ago, David Goggins was kind of all the rage, and I watched him go on. I was like, you know what? Maybe I can run more. And I ran like 4 miles and destroyed my feet. I had stress fractures like crazy. It was awful. Yeah. But I guess because I saw that you went through a pretty transformational like weight loss as well. From what, so like, I guess what sparks that? Why running? And like convinced me to be a runner, even though I'm not.
I'm not. I would never convince anyone. When you said that about your feet, like my toes are on one foot are just messed up. Like they're all over the place and, blisters all the time and stuff like that too. But it's, and to me, like I would never try to convince, honestly, I would never try to convince anyone to become a runner. I would try to convince anybody to like find something active that they love doing. Yeah. Whether that's, extra like weightlifting, playing sports, things like that too. I enjoy, I think, I enjoy running, but I hate it some days. Like tomorrow is like Sunday's my long run, and I always kind of dread it a little bit, and then you get it done. And then, I like people are like, I was so happy when it was done. And it's like a lot of times I'm like, nah, that was horrible. That sucked.
It's like I don't actually enjoy it at all for the most part.
Yeah. But I find it just is it's almost a meditational thing for me. I really get a lot of my ideas. I get made fun of because I always do like these sweaty videos after. And, if you're like really bothered by that, maybe you need to get out a little bit more too. Right? Like, are you bothered by someone sweating because they're exercising hard? Like, So I just find it really clears my mind. A lot of my best ideas have come from running. The weight loss thing, I don't want to really attribute it to running because the reality of it is I've always exercised. I've always been an active person, but you always want to hope that you can eat whatever you want if you're active. And that's not how it is. The older you get, the harder it is to eat whatever you want. So really I got my health and, my diet in check. And it was for me basically saying like, I didn't go on any crash diet. I didn't do any fat or anything like that. I said, okay, what do I need to do today that I could do a year from now and continue it? So that was really important to me because I've actually, I'm a little yo-yo weight guy. Like I've lost 100 pounds, I think 3 times.
What?
Yeah. So like, in my, I think it was like my early 20s I did it, in my 30s I did it. So this is probably the longest I've maintained it, and I think it was really, honestly, and this is this is maybe like a Canadian thing because I don't know any US viewers. One of the times I lost weight was when I was like a kid, and
Mhm.
all I ate was cheese whiz sandwiches. I don't know what happened then. And a lot of people have like, what is cheese whiz? Like, if you're in the US, I don't think
Oh,
they have cheese
man.
whiz here. Like, they have like cheese product,
Oh, there's
but
nothing like cheese whiz.
not cheese whiz. So I don't know what happened then. But yeah, like I still maintain that same diet. And the reality of it, and I've talked about this quite a bit. I always wanted to lose weight. I was always
Yeah.
trying to lose weight, and honestly, very surface level reasons. I want to look
Yeah.
better.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? And that's not really, like, of course, everyone wants to look better.
Like, I'm eating these cheese whiz sandwiches, I'm enjoying it, but you know what? There's gotta be more.
Yeah. But I think what really was the switch was when COVID happened. A lot of people the number one comorbidity of people dying with it was obesity. So I'm like, if I actually get COVID right now, I am not in a good space. Like, I could be in massive trouble. And
Mhm.
now this is not just about me. Like, I have little kids.
Yeah.
So I better figure this out real quick. So I think that was for me like a kind of an
Yeah,
awakening
3
moment.
times losing 100 pounds is wild, but I feel like
Yeah.
that's literally every single person that's ever gone through. Like, if
Mhm.
you have the capacity for a massive weight loss, like, transformation, typically it's you go through a few cycles of that, 'cause I've even had,
Yeah.
like 60-pound drops, and I've fluctuated too, but I've never had that big of a fluctuation. That's
Yeah.
kinda crazy, but
Yeah.
for your work in the education game, because I
Yeah.
was actually speaking with, Jennifer Gonzalez from Cult of
Yeah.
Pedagogy, and she's the one that, actually, like, introduced you to me. So kind of got to know your stuff. And for the most part,
Okay.
most of your work is focused on principles. Like, meaning like the physical position of being a
Yep.
principal.
Yep.
So
Not
kind of why that
AL, not LE.
pardon?
AL, not LE.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess
Yeah.
for what kind of like going into education, why target that role specifically in most of your work?
Yeah. It's not, I don't think necessarily it's principles as much as it's leadership. Like, when you
Mhm.
take care of adults, I think principal specifically, that role. And like, I always always try to phrase this the proper way, because I don't want to deter anyone from like how
Mhm.
important their position is. But principals are really crucial to education in the sense that they have the most authority closest to children. So, for example, let's say, and I'm sure you've seen this, in your experience as an educator, you have a principal who's not really that great, but is like good with families, has good communication skills. They can kind of get away with not being great. And it doesn't matter, like, how things are going there too. And, one of the like red flag answers, because I ask this when I talk to teachers, I'll say like, hey, how's your principal? And there's like, I'm like, there's little things. And one of them is like, oh, they're great. They just let me do whatever I want. Or they're really nice. Those are not great. Those are not good answers to me. Right. Like, really nice is, not a great answer. Let me do
Mhm.
whatever I want. I can actually understand why that answer seems really exciting, because they might have been in a situation where there was a micromanaging principle, and it's like, just
Yeah.
leave me alone. Like, you don't know what you're doing.
Mhm.
And I think it's really, Allison Apsey and I wrote What Makes a Great Principal together. And the reason I wrote that book is I don't know if I knew the impact of having a great principal. I don't really think I understood it until I got one. And then it really changed things for me. Like, I never was like, oh, my principal sucks.
Okay.
But when I had an amazing principal, I was like, oh, wow, this hugely makes a difference. Like,
So what was the amazing part of that specific individual that kind of
yeah, and
stuck out?
like, I actually, and I wrote about, I was really excited because I was able to share that book with, her name's Kelly Wilkins. She was a principal in Parkland. And weirdly enough, I only had her for a year. Like, I had her for a year. I was going to quit education. I hated teaching. I was like, okay, I'm going to give it one last try at this new job, see how it goes. And I went from like, I'm going to quit, to became an assistant principal the next year, like, which is, I couldn't believe that was where my path had gone.
Mhm.
And it would have never gone there if it wasn't for her. There's no way. And then, 2 years later, I'm principal. And then 2 years after that, I'm, training leadership, doing leadership development, focusing on innovation, and just, totally changed a trajectory. And it was really kind of how she, I always I'm always cautious of this. I don't want her to say she made me feel valued.
Mhm.
Because there's things you can make people feel that are not real.
Mhm.
She
What
truly
do you mean by
valued.
that?
She you can say all the nice things, but then it's like, oh, we really love your feedback. It's really important to us. But then people never act on it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So you might feel something, but it doesn't really matter. And one of the stories I shared in What Makes a Great Principal, she brought me in. So when I had the interview for that school, it was very different from what I experienced before in interviews. Typically, it's like a firing squad, right? It's like
Yep.
one person, there's 6 people just throwing questions at you, trying to give you no feedback on how you're doing. And it's it's terrible. And you
It's
think about that,
very intimidating.
right? And when are you going to ever have that experience in a school? That's
Mhm.
you're not replicating. So you're not necessarily really seeing the true interactions of what the dynamic would be between
Yeah.
people, because that's never I've never had an interview like that, and then 2 months later went through that same feeling, do you know what I mean, in a
Yeah.
school. So when she interviewed me, it was her and Carolyn Cameron. She was assistant principal, who was also an amazing principal and an assistant principal in her own right, and she's written several books, just absolutely incredible. They basically gave me a list of things, topics that I would want to talk about, and it was given to me prior to the interview. It wasn't just random lists. It was things that obviously they were important to the school, but it wasn't we're going to ask you these, here's 10 questions, right? It's hey,
Yeah.
talk about this, talk about this. And the job I applied for was middle school teacher. It wasn't middle school math. It wasn't grade 7, science. It was middle school teacher. So we have this
Okay.
conversation and we're just talking, and it was just like a dynamic of what you might have in a staff room, having conversation, and no word of a lie. I'm crying one minute, I'm laughing the other minute. And and I walked out and I'm like, what the heck just happened? That was so weird, because it was it felt normal. It felt
Yeah.
just kind of like how you have a conversation with colleagues, with your administrators. And basically what they had done was, and this, I know you reference, I saw, some of the things that you're talking about, really thinking about innovation, right? Innovation a lot
Mhm.
of times is synonymous with technology, and which I totally have pushed against.
Mhm.
It's really thinking about how we do things differently. So this interview process is totally different than anything I've ever experienced, but also kind of going through that process. Um, the reason they didn't say grade 7 math, grade 8 science, because they had someone who taught very specific things, who I think went on a maternity leave, because that's what I was coming in to do.
Mhm.
Um, it was, let's find the best person that we can, who meets the needs of what we can do as a school, and then we will kind of shape the position with them, right? Because if we can find someone that has something that we don't necessarily have, that can really benefit. So one of the things that they needed was someone kind of focusing on educational technology, utilizing those things, connecting that. So they're kind of putting these pieces. So then it wasn't, I didn't get an immediate call. It was hey, we think we want this guy. What pieces can we move in the school? So
Mhm.
probably wouldn't excel teaching this, but he'd be fine teaching that. So can we get this person, would they want to move? Would they want to try to change something? So she was always looking for the best people. And sometimes when you say hey, I want a grade 5 math teacher, right? You might have someone who could teach grade 5 math, who actually, weirdly enough, might want to teach grade 5 math, but you've never asked the question as an administrator.
Yeah.
And so you kind of limit who you're getting, as opposed to hey, we're looking for a new middle school teacher. And it's okay, what pieces can we fit in here? What things can we move around? Because she's always looking to hire the best people. So then, I got the call, and then just I remember she gave me a schedule for basically it was halftime, teaching math, teaching, I think, social studies. And then
Classic.
the other half was basically working with other staff, thinking about education technology. And the schedule she had created was basically I was going to be with grade 6A for 40 minutes and then grade 6B for 40 minutes. Then I was going to be grade 7A 40 minutes, 7B 40 minutes. And like basically I was going to be with every teacher for 40 minutes for, once a week, and then come back the next week and do this. And I was like, I don't like this. This is not good. And it's like, you can't really build any momentum. You're not really kind of working with them. You're not getting to see purpose. It's going to be a person who does tech stuff for 40 minutes. And it's almost like bringing in a magician, right? Entertain us for 40 minutes, right? So I said,
it's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, so I'm like, I don't know. And I remember saying this to her. I have no job security. I'm like, she doesn't have to fire me. Like, she just says, hey, the person's back. Like, that's it. Like, it's done, right? And I felt really comfortable with her because she created that space where, you could ask her stuff. And I said, I don't know about this schedule. Like, I don't know if this will work. And she's like, well, what would you do? I'm like, I don't know. It's your job, right? You're the one who makes schedule. She's like, no, like if you think you have a better idea, what would you do? And I said, and then she's like, here, I'll give you a couple of days. Come back and tell me what you do with that schedule. I was like, what? Like, just little things like that were really weird. So I actually said, hey, what I would like to do, can I have like 2 weeks with this teacher? And then like 2 weeks with this teacher, so we could do some like project-based stuff, can kind of dig into it and like really kind of tie into the curriculum, get to know them. And I said, I'll still like actually probably hit the same amount of minutes. It might not be exact with every teacher, but instead of just me kind of popping in, she's like, I love that. Yeah, go for it. Let's see how it goes. And so like when you talk about the idea of being like feeling valued, she actually, challenged, she said, okay, come up with a solution. She implemented the solution. And even like at the end of the year, and really when that was happening, one of the things she really kind of like, I really wanted to do a good job because now I was like kind of trusted with the solution. So if the solution doesn't work, I can't blame the principal. I'll say like, hey, this didn't work because you made me do 40 minutes.
It's almost like a weird 180 on you. It's like,
right now it's like, holy, I'm like way more invested in how well this goes. And like there was times where I would be doing something on like a weekend or whatever, and that she would ask me to do. And I would be sitting there, I'm like, how does she get me to do all this stuff? Like, like how is this happening? Because I would just do anything for her. And because like I saw the impact that I had, not only, and this was not just me, I'd be lying if it said like she only made me feel this way and no one else felt this way in the school. This was just the way she ran things. And then at the end of the year, she said to me like, hey, we have basically this budget for technology. And how would you spend it? I'm like, I don't know. I'm a teacher. Like, why would you ask me this question? She's like, this is why we hired you. Like, we hired you because we don't know this stuff. So you tell me. So now I'm like, crap, now I have to make the decision for other teachers. And so like, if I'm going to make that decision, maybe I should go talk to the other teachers. Cause like, I don't want them complaining in the staff room about how the tech sucks. Cause I'll be there. So then so then I like said, here's what I would do based on this feedback that I've got. And so like, it just made me, so it's like things like that, where you see the impact you have on other classrooms. And like I said, that was just something that she did really well. And, it made people want to do better. They saw their value past the classroom. And so, like I said, I saw one of your questions you said, and I actually, I don't know, did you read What Makes a Good Principal? Because it was like interesting.
I didn't read. I read through like the table of contents and read through some of the sample and the preface, but nothing like actually through it. But
yeah, because like I think literally the first question is that do schools need principals, right? Because probably there's a blog post that was written by a friend of mine. I won't say their name. And it was like, do schools need principals? I'm a principal at this time. So I'm like kind of mad about this. I'm like, how dare you ask this question? But like it was, and I remember having the conversation with this gentleman who I was very good friends with. I said, the reason you are questioning this right now is because I don't think you like your principal. So I think you're making this like big narrative on education because but I know the benefit of a really good principal to kind of bring, it's kind of like saying, does a team need a coach? Right? Yeah, like it depends on the team, right? Like, or actually I shouldn't say that. It depends on the coach. If you have a really good coach for any team, right? The coach will bring out the best of you, but if the coach sucks, then you don't really need a coach. You know what I mean?
Because I almost find too, in education specifically, people are always kind of looking for the way to argue why some certain positions aren't needed.
Yeah, totally.
And that's such a reflex, and I don't understand.
Yeah.
You can almost make the case, okay, if this one position wasn't here, what would the impact be?
Right.
And I do find no one necessarily knows the value until they've had the one that kind of flips that perspective. Because in the experiences that I've had and the people that I've spoken to about education is that the only thing I always come back to about what I ask is a valuable asset or skill for a vice principal or an administrator to have is action. That's all I've heard from them. But it doesn't even necessarily sound, from your perspective, the one that you saw, that action was the right one. It was just value. That's a very different kind of perspective there. And so why were you kind of only there for a year? Like what kind of
and that's funny because she knew kind of like my bigger goal was to go the ed tech route, like, you know, be a ed tech for maybe Alberta education, kind of doing that. She knew that was kind of where I was going to go. And she had supported me in that. And that was like the thing that I really loved about her. She like always wanted to bring out the best of you. And if that meant she only had you for a year or two, she knew if she always cultivated that, people that were always like really ambitious and inspiring would want to come to that school. And I remember actually she was getting pushed by, when I was a principal, someone was making fun of her, said like, you can't keep a teacher for like more than 2 years. Like they all leave you right away. Right. Cause like basically like so many of my colleagues in that school went on to curriculum instruction, went on to like principalships, went on to like superintendencies. Right. And the teachers that stayed were like amazing teachers. Now, full transparency, some of the teachers that were there for 1 or 2 years, they just weren't that great, and she would move them on, you know. Like, and part of it was her belief was, I don't want anyone to be at a job that they despise, that they're not necessarily good at, and you don't want to do that for 30 years. So it's not a good life to lead, right? So it's like kind of, I can't remember, it's like a Brene Brown is like, you know, clarity is kindness or something like that, like being consistent with this. So she an assistant principal job came up in the middle of summer, and I remember like it was, you know, when like a assistant principal job comes up in the middle of summer, you know, something went wrong. Something's gone wrong there, right?
Yeah.
Something's up.
Yep. Something went down.
Yeah, like it's not 3 months.
No.
Oh, I don't know. Like, I don't know any of the background. And I said, hey, like, would you mind if I applied for this? Cause I don't want to be an assistant principal, but I want to make sure the district knows I'm like interested in leadership positions. So I just, you know, probably good practice, things like that. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I think I got an interview because I don't think anyone was really looking at that time because it's summer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
everyone's already got their positions for next year.
Yeah, like they're probably like gone for vacation. I'm like doing nothing. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like this job came up, so I might as well apply for it. So I actually had that interview. I got the interview, which I was like, oh, that's weird. So I got the interview, and I get in this interview, and the gentleman's name is Archie Lilico, another amazing principal. I think again, I'm blessed to have this. So we're in there, and you know, like, hey, how's it going? Like all niceties, all that kind of stuff. Like I cannot remember anything like after about 5 minutes in, because we were like yelling at each other. It was the most strange experience I had ever. It was just like a back and forth. We were arguing. There was like an
over
HR,
what?
Yeah, there's an HR manager there. And I was like, and so I remember calling Kelly and I said, I don't know who because like it's in the same district.
Yeah.
And I said, that was the worst interview I've ever had in my life. Like after what I had with you.
You're just trying to enjoy your summer and put your name in there.
What is going on? Like I'm fighting with this guy. And she said, you know what? I know Archie. I don't think it went as bad as you think it went. And I'm like, did you talk to him? She's like, no. But he's a little different. Just trust me. Okay. So 2-3 days later, I get a phone call from him, you know, and it's kind of common courtesy, like, hey, you know, what I'm expecting. Hey, like, thanks for applying. You didn't get the job. We decided to go somewhere else. So he like called me and said, "Hey, like I just want to let you know, like it was a pretty contentious interview, and I actually would like to offer you the job." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like thrown off because I'm ready for like a no.
Yeah.
And he said he said the thing that's really important to me is that in their interview process, I am looking for someone who will challenge me on the stuff that I'm saying because I want to do an amazing job. Because he was a principal there, like he had been hired as a principal maybe 2 days earlier when he got the job, right? So there's a whole admin change, right?
Okay.
So he's coming new into
So
this
really things had been going down.
somewhat no. Okay. So so then it was so I have this and he goes at the end of the day, if you don't agree with something I'm saying, you need to tell me. But behind closed doors. But when we go out there, I make the final decision, and whether you agree or not, you got to back me up because you can't be going behind my back and stuff like this too. Because if something goes wrong at the school, the superintendent's not calling you; they're calling me. So I have to like live and die with the decision, and I need your support on it too. But don't ever let me go out there thinking the idea is stupid and not saying anything. So I was like, I got you. Like I could tell you your ideas are stupid all day if I believe that, right? So that was our relationship, and it was really, really beneficial. I never hesitated to tell him that because he set the tone. His mentality was like, I'm trying to hire someone who thinks differently than me, who maybe appeals to different people than I might appeal to. I don't need me. So anyways, we're getting ready for the school year, and meeting before the staff comes back. And one of the first days I meet one of our teachers. She's a veteran teacher, and literally 2 minutes later, obviously it's me. Her and I start fighting. We start going at it, and I'm like, "What is going on here? Like, why am I like getting in fight?" So he's like, "Listen, I know of her. Like, I've never worked with her, but she's got a good reputation. So like, she's not bad. Just trust me. Like, give her some time." She's like, we're new here, so she's
like, I'm just trying to get to know these people, and I'm just getting in scraps.
So anyways, like I got to know her really, really well, and she like would push on both myself and Archie, but she also had like tremendous influence with the staff. So if there is like a new thing that we wanted to try, something we wanted to implement, we would actually talk to her first, and we say like, "What do you think of this?" And she's like, "I don't like it." I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "This, this, this." I'm like, "Okay. Can you give us a week? Like we'll tweak some of these things," and then we'd say, "Okay, based on what you said, here's the things that we've changed. What do you think now?" She's like, "I love it." Well, of course she loved it because she sees her feedback throughout it, right? So then when we would kind of introduce some new things, try some different things, she always had her back, and she was like, "Yeah, right." And she would, and people listened and trusted her. And the reality of it is, teachers, who they like listening to, other teachers, principals who they like listening to, other principals. So when they know they do the role, so we knew this. So anyways, 2 years as assistant principal, Archie's mentality was, your role is not to be my assistant principal until you die. It's to develop you to become a principal. So 2 years later, I get my own school. The first person I hire is her because I know she's going to do for me what I did for Archie. So
she wanted to be an assistant principal.
She didn't want to be. She didn't want to be. Right. But when I explained to her, like, I want you to come over with me to this, and he was like mad at me for bringing her because she's so good, right? She's a great teacher. I said, I know you will never let me do something dumb, and I need that pushback. And you just have a presence that is different from mine. And
I think presence is a huge thing too.
Yeah,
like you can kind of get the same education, you can kind of get the similar kind of coursework and all that stuff. But I think I wrote one of my questions in there was, what is a principal outside of disciplining students, creating schedules, and mastering spreadsheets? So like, what do you mean by presence? Like, I guess what was different, not even just in her, but how do you define that and what you look for?
So at the time, I'm 33 years old. I'm a big guy. I'm athletic. And I honestly, I think people were thinking I was going to like get another guy like me. She is probably in late 40s, very quiet, like a just different demeanor. And like, I'm gonna be honest with you, like sometimes a kid, like I always share this story when I was a grade 4 teacher. I remember Marlene Bertram, amazing teacher. She put first day of like before kids get there, she puts up like penguins with the names of kids, and they're gonna like penguin class. Like I'm in the penguin class. They're excited about it, right? Now all of a sudden I feel guilty.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I gotta do something. So I love basketball. So what do? Basketball class, right? So like I got a basketball with every kid's name. And then like I talk about this, that imagine a kid coming in there who hates sports, who's like, oh my God, you have a year with this guy? Like I hate sports so much.
I love penguins and I hate sports.
Right. So it's just like little things like that too. And like, that's why I really talk about the importance of like knowing who you serve. Like if you can plan your whole class for the year before your class ever walks in, then you're probably not doing a great job, right? Because you like need to understand who the people you serve. So I think it's just, there's different dynamics. Like I'm not a big like, oh, introverts are way better leaders than extroverts, or extroverts are way better. I think has to be kind of like, different appeals, different mentalities, different strengths. Like one of the things that I truly loved about Cheryl is like, for example, I did the student discipline when I was assistant principal, right? And and I did it because Archie asked me to do it. And that was kind of his viewpoint. And he had worked basically with kindergarten grade 5 students the majority of his career. And this was like a middle school. And, it's a K-9 school. So most of your issues are going to be, the older grades. And I had worked with that, grade level prior. So he kind of was like, it's not really my jam. And you probably have a better understanding of this. So I did it. But when I became a principal, I'm like, I actually am really good at this. So I'm gonna keep the discipline stuff. Like all the discipline kids in the office, that's gonna be my jam. And she did stuff that I couldn't do. And weirdly enough, I never asked her to do anything because she just so complimented what I wasn't good at. And so she always like said, hey, I'll do this. I'm like, oh, awesome. Like, awesome.
So what did you recognize as your weaknesses?
Well, I think she had a training in like special education, IPPs, IEPs, all that stuff, whatever they call them.
Yeah.
Wherever
different names everywhere, just for fun.
OPPs, whatever. So like just that was not my thing. And I just am not like, I can't stare at a screen. I'm not like, my thing is not mine's my big picture. She's more like minute details.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, she was a way better teacher than I ever was. And she had taught for longer. She had done this. And, there's like a lot of conversations, like every principal has to be a great teacher. But going back to like a sports analogy, some of the best coaches were terrible players. And some of the worst coaches were amazing players. Because they're like,
that's true.
Yeah, because they don't understand like how I'm Michael Jordan. How come you're not Michael Jordan? Well, because you're Michael Jordan, right?
Yeah.
So like even if you think about that in the mentality of teachers, some of the best teachers in the profession were terrible students. And the reason they are so good is because they understand when a student struggles because they were the same kid. Whereas if you think, for example, like a math teacher, some of the most brilliant math minds in education cannot teach math effectively to students who do not understand, who just don't, math is not second nature. And it's like, how do you not understand calculus, right? So I just knew, like, it's just, she knew things that like I didn't know. She had like, like I said, I was like way more boisterous. I was way more out there. I was like playing basketball with the kids and stuff like that. She was more quiet. And she went on to become like, it's funny because I didn't want to become an assistant principal and then became a principal. She didn't want to become an assistant principal. She became an amazing principal. And so, but she just, and I think when she probably hired people that had different skill sets because that was like the lineage of what we were trying to do in that situation. Just try to get someone who doesn't necessarily do the stuff that you do. Right. And I think that's where it was like really kind of looking at this. I remember there was one, I can't remember what the one thing was. But it was like some planning. Like I hated writing all the district stuff and blah, 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 but some of it,
school improvement planning and all that.
Like actually, it was like, I think it was something like that. And I was like, had this kind of streak of not asking her to do anything, and she would just do the stuff that I didn't want to do. But she wasn't doing this one thing. And I remember like going to her to ask her to do it. And then she's like, "Hey, do you want me to do that?" I'm like, "Yes." I literally, the one time I was going to ask her, she actually, as I'm walking down to her, she's like, "Hey, I'll do that thing." I'm like, "Oh yeah, okay, that's great."
Like,
I would have totally
I wanted to do that.
I wanted to do it so bad. So, and I think that to me is a really important aspect of leadership is, are you covering, the places that you don't really understand, that the areas that you need someone doing this too, right? So like even for example, the discipline thing, it shouldn't be the assistant principal does discipline because that's the role of the assistant principal. It's actually like who is the person that is maybe best at that and, would actually serve the school. And as a principal, that, even though that was typically a assistant principal role, I actually, not only was I good at it, I enjoyed doing it. I was like something that was, and honestly, because I was a terrible kid, and like kids would do stuff, I'm like, "Is that all you did?" Like, 'cause I was like, way worse than you. Yeah, way worse than you. So so I was just like an understanding of it, and yeah, and so it was that was part of the experience. I think that's really kind of shaped me seeing some of that stuff, because when you kind of go into different places, you're trying to show people things that they might not see because they're so kind of involved in it too. And that's what we really try to hire. And we also and I'm very proud that many of the teachers that I worked with, they went on to like leadership positions, they went on to these things. And the hope is that we put them in positions like Kelly put me in, where they saw the ownership. One of the best pieces of advice I got from Kelly when I applied for that assistant principal position, and I always try to share this with other people, because people go, I know you transition from a teaching role to more of like a
resource
role. And you're doing a lot of work with adults too, right?
Yeah,
like it's not just students. So she said to me, we had what's called, and you might be familiar with, like probably you'd be like one of the few people I've ever talked to that would be familiar with this, because you're from Alberta, right?
Yeah.
They had what was called the teaching quality standard, right?
Yes.
And that's how you were.
Yes, the TQS.
Yeah, TQS. But then I think at the time it was like they changed it. It was like the principal quality standard, but I think it's like a
leadership quality. Yeah.
Yeah. So like it changed, but it was principal quality standard at the time when I was there. And she said, when I applied for assistant principal, I said, what, how should I like shape my resume? She said, what I would do is I would go through the principal quality standard, and I would actually align the stuff that you're doing as a teacher that aligns with the standards you're expected. Because what you're actually showing is you're already doing the leadership jobs in the role of as teacher. And I was like, and so it was like the analogy I try to give, and this is, old man advice, that we learned, is like
my favorite.
It was yeah, stop it. Only I can refer to me as an old man. So it's the like dress to the job you want, not the job you have.
Yeah.
And that was the connection I made when she said that. So then you're like saying, like, am I doing this? And I think that's really good advice is, if you're a teacher and you wanted to go to like an admin position, a leadership position, find what the standards are for leadership, show how you're doing it. Because so many teachers are actually doing that currently. So if I can show you like, hey, I'm actually already meeting all these standards from my role, I'm a sure thing.
Like it's not something you are going to work toward. It's something you're kind of already doing it and kind of like your daily presence. Yeah.
Yeah. So we really try to work with our staff to put them in those positions. And many of them have gone on to I think to me, they didn't just go on to those roles. They've gone on to be really good in those roles.
Yeah.
Right. And, constantly developing, people that think a little bit different, want to hire, and I don't know how long, you've taught and what your experiences are with administrators, but a lot of times the administrators that I encountered, it was like 3 people who thought the exact same way. And people knew that was very different about myself and Archie. Like we thought very differently about things, and we would kind of, go back and forth, and we would challenge, like people would like, are you guys okay? Because they would hear, they're like, yeah, we're just talking.
Well, I honestly feel like that's I feel like that's super common, because I guess it was kind of different for me because my first few years actually substitute teaching
Yeah.
It was because of the demand for teachers. I was actually subbing full-time in university, so I couldn't actually work full-time yet.
Right.
But I loved that because you got to actually get exposed to what so many different teams are like.
Yeah.
But I do generally think that it's still kind of the mentality where like the VP kind of takes over the discipline part.
Yeah.
And the job becomes so big for principals that it's kind of hard to be like, if you have a school of, I mean, in Alberta, like somewhere, even in Florida, there's some like 3,000 and 4,000 students. Like you can't just be the main disciplinarian all the time. Sometimes if you're at a smaller school, like even K-9, you were probably dealing with 12, 1,500 kids.
Right.
So I find that
well, I don't know if that's true though. And I think like, so here, and here's the, so a lot of my work is in the US. And so I'm in Florida, and then you have, for example, Miami-Dade schools, which I think is maybe top three size district in the US, right? So I think it's like New York, LA, Miami.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge district, right? So then you go and like, I'm talking, I don't even know. I'm guessing like hundreds of thousands of students. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they got massive high schools, things like that, right? So then you go to like Alabama and you go there and they're like, so, hey, you know what? We have like a lot of issues because we're like such a huge district and we're so big. I'm like, how many students? Like, we have like 5,000 kids. So like, so it's big for maybe that state. And so like, it's kind of relative and you kind of like get into this. And I think part of it too is like, there's something really, I remember working with, I think it was Surrey schools in BC, and they were either 1 or 2 for size, like population size was either, I think it was between them and Vancouver. And working with them, they had this massive district, but it was like everyone knew each other. There was like almost like a I don't want to, for lack of a better term, like almost like a family type atmosphere. It was just very collegial, connected, because it was really intentional in creating that. Now, you know, this is, I can't really speak for them now. I haven't been there in, 10, 15 years. But at that time, I was shocked because I had been in districts, and I had been in districts that were smaller than the one I had been in with Kelly. And I don't want to name any districts, right?
Yeah.
We're smaller. I had never met the superintendents ever. Not one day as a teacher for multiple years in the district. Okay. In a larger district that I go to, when I get hired there, on the very first day, I met the superintendent, all the superintendent team, all the people there, because they made sure that they connected with all the new teachers and you had access, that you'd see them. They would know my name, things like that. So even in a smaller place, they were like, well, we're like too big. Yes, it's that mentality, as opposed to like going out of your way to connect with people. And when you actually make those connections, even in a large district, and you have a trust built in, connected, things get done faster because you know each other, you can count on people, you have a relationship with them. So like even, at the end of my time in that district, I was at central office. And I hated, I hated actually being in central office, like the actual office, because I really like being around students. I like being around kids, just a different energy, right? Like when you're around adults all day and not students, it's like a different vibe, right?
Yep.
And kids, like if I wanted to know, like, hey, where do I look worse today? No adult's going to tell me that. Kids will. What's that thing on your head? What's that thing on your forehead? Oh, that's the stitch that appeared. Thanks for pointing it out. Because I know it's pointing
especially
at you.
in K-9, 100%.
Right. Like,
they will point out everything.
You like it's fun. It's like horrible and funny at the same time, because it's like they don't care. They're not like
literally yesterday. I was running with cross country, and I just got my haircut recently, and I guess on the bottom of my t-shirt, some of my back hair was coming out. And the student's just like,
there you go.
Why is your back so hairy? I'm like, whoa. Like, why are we like, you need to chill.
Right.
Like, we need to chill.
Yeah, but it's like they don't it's like they don't care though either.
Yeah.
They're not like judging you. They're just pointing out something they see.
Like, why you do that? Like, don't worry about it. Like,
so when I was at central office in a very large geographical district, I would call a principal up and say, hey, I need to do some like office stuff and it sucks. And I, like, as I mentioned before, like it's just part of some of the admin jobs, right?
Yep.
Is there a teacher there that I can like sit in their class for a few hours and just kind of like do it in the back, like kind of just be a fly on the wall? Like, and make sure you ask, like, I don't want to like show up and surprise someone, right? So then a teacher would, have me in that was, very comfortable with me in there. And I would like say to them, hey, look, listen, I know I'm from central office. I want you to understand this. I'm not here to observe you. If anything, I'm trying to observe the environment we're putting you in, because a lot of times we don't really understand what's going on in schools. So if I'm not here, I can't really, make some of these decisions that I have to make. So I want to just kind of see like if there's things that, are kind of going on. So I would like sit in a classroom. And I remember actually distinctly one time there's a teacher pulling out an iPad card, right? And they're pulling out this iPad card, Wi-Fi, like this Wi-Fi is like pretty new. We're not really, it's not that great. So the kids are like all having trouble like connecting to the Wi-Fi. She's like gets up on a table and like this has never worked, but we still do it. He gets up on a table and like starts like waving it. Like like it's gonna be the Wi-Fi thunderbolt. Hits it will connect.
Yes.
And it's like watching Cirque du Soleil. Right? I'm watching this in the back of the room as I'm like knocking off email, whatever.
Yeah.
So I remember like calling IT department, because that's like kind of my purview at the time. I said, hey, we have this teacher in here who's probably gonna like break her neck because the Wi-Fi is not working, and we need more routers in this room and you need to check the entire school, because she's like doing everything to make this work. And she'll use it, but other teachers will not. If it doesn't work,
sacrificing herself,
right? Other teachers, like she sees the value in it, and so she'll do whatever she can to make it work. But a lot of teachers that are a little bit reluctant, a little bit resistant, it doesn't work for them. Well, that's why I never use it. I'm never using that thing again. So we have to remove all those barriers. So I remember like calling right in front of her and like having the authority to get something done immediately. And she looked at me, and I wouldn't have known that if I wasn't there. And so like you've probably seen this too, Lucas. I reference it as the superintendent entourage, right? So like the superintendent comes in, in Alberta, they're wearing like in winter, it's like a long coat. And there's the board of trustees, and they're all like squatting down, and they're pretending, and it's like everyone's like standing up straight, and they're acting a certain way. There's a lot of anxiety going on, and then they just kind of walk. Nothing really gets done. Nothing really happens, and it's more like a presence thing. And it's like, hey, can we get some pictures with kids? And then it's like in the paper, like it's all this stuff, and it's just fake. It's just garbage, right? And then. And so everyone fakes for like 10, 15 minutes until they leave, and then you go back to doing what you're doing. So part of it for me was I was going to be so present in classrooms, no matter the role, that I did not want to intimidate you. I did not want you feeling like uncomfortable, because when you only pop in once in a while, it's terrifying. But when you're like there all the time,
unannounced,
totally.
I've had it where, and she's super nice, like the superintendent I had before, and I won't name her, but I remember explicitly, because I can tell you explicitly what I was lecturing on, that's how it was terrifying. Because they walked in, I was going hyperinflation in Germany, 1932, and I was like, you know what? Okay, I think she's going to be here for 10 minutes. I was like, how can I make sure this goes really well for 10? But like that pressure it shouldn't be needed. Not necessarily needed, but it shouldn't necessarily have existed in the first place. So I like what you're saying about making the active decision to be present.
Yeah, and that was when I was a principal, assistant principal, I would every morning walk the entire school and go into every single classroom and say good morning to them, connect with them. Sometimes I would take my laptop and sit in the back. I would just kind of do it randomly. I wanted to make it so normal to you that people just kept going, doing their thing. Do you know what I mean? But when it like happens, it's like a disruption to class. It's like a little bit weird. It's like someone's playing trumpets. It's like this thing. And I just wanted it to, because my role is to support the staff. My role is to support the kids. And so me just kind of popping in, not really knowing what's going on, getting everything secondhand. I want to kind of see this too, because there's time obviously to do observations, things like that. And that was going to be very explicitly shared with them when that was happening. But it was always about, I need to put my people in the best position for them to succeed. So like, I actually just did a video on this. There's a difference between removing barriers, which in my opinion is the bare minimum that's not being met in many schools, but then going to like adding value, like actually making sure that because of what you do as an educational leader, you're making not the lives only easier, but better. Because if you don't make them better, then why are you there? Right. So I think that's too, like, even in that, when I was mentioning that before, the what makes a great principal, you kind of mentioned that question. I say, like, I actually, if you're a bad principal, I don't think you need one. Right. If you're a great principal, like how different that world can be. And you know, I talk a lot about basketball. I know you're Canadian. You see the Kawhi Leonard thing behind me?
I do. Yes.
I was there. Just by the way.
What?
Yeah, I was actually, you know, total aside, I'm a huge basketball fan.
Yeah.
I was in Denver.
Yeah.
And I was actually going to the East Coast for an event. So I had an event in Denver, had a layover in Toronto, and then had to go to the East Coast. So the layover was the day of that Game 7, Philly versus Toronto Raptors. And I called Air Canada and I begged. And I'm like, you know, it's going to be like a couple $1,000 if you change the flight. I'm like, can I get my layover in the morning? Can I go from wherever? Right. And then they were like, nah, you can't, you know, I'm like,
you can't do that.
And I actually like found a good ticket and I called back and just someone else picked up. I'm like, hey. And he's like, I know you're asking. I got you. I like never forgot that. It was like, if he could have went, he was going to go. So there's no way he's holding me back. So he just took it like nothing.
Wow.
So I actually ended up last second going to that game, and I got such a good ticket. You can see me if you watch that clip on ESPN, like on the highlight where Kawhi hits the shot, I can show you the back of my head. You can actually see me in the clip. Right?
That's crazy.
It was
like, insane. That's literally,
it's, you know, like
the biggest moment in Toronto sports. In
totally. You know, it's like,
years.
I cannot wait. In like 10, 15 years, they're going to have the Canadian heritage moments. And it's like, do you remember? And I'm like, that's where I was. I was right there. Oh, that guy. That's me.
That's the black hair right there.
Yeah, that's right there. Because you can see, like, you know, you can see if you look for
I'm
going
to go watch it after
look for the curls, right? I'm like, my back, I'm like about 3-4 rows back of the court. And yeah, like, and it was just someone just had a single ticket. And they're like, I'm not going to say a single ticket. So I got a single ticket for like nothing. Just because they're like, you couldn't get rid of it. Yeah, they couldn't get rid of it.
Oh, because
I think they had 4 seats and they sold 3 of them. And I got so I just went by myself. It was amazing. So anyways, the reason I bring up the basketball thing is I used to ref basketball. And the analogy that I always make, that if there's a similarity between like administrators in schools and referees. If you are a bad referee, everybody notices you. Like that, like if you're a bad referee, like you suck, ref. You're gonna hear it the whole time, right?
I ref hockey, so I can relate.
Right. If you're a good referee, people don't pay attention to you. But you're like helping with the flow of the game. You know, you're it's not like you're not active. It's not like you're not making people better. But people don't really notice you, right? And a lot of times the best administrators don't actually get the credit, right? They don't get the credit for the work they do because they're kind of just helping with the flow of the game, making sure everything goes smooth. And you know, if you're a hockey referee, you totally understand that. But if you suck, like, I might as well not even have you, because you're probably making things worse, right?
At least in sports, they'll be upfront and letting you know that they don't like your decisions, but whereas teaching is a little bit different.
Right. Well, you'll find out.
You'll get it a different way, but
you'll find out. So
either way, the parents will tell you. But
yeah. So I think that's part of that role, is that it's really beneficial if you have it. Like I've been so, like, I aspire to those people. That's why I wrote What Makes a Great Principal. I already say, I'm not saying I was a great principal. I'm saying I benefited from having one. And like, even and I don't know, like, I know you kind of said you kind of just skimmed it over. What was really important to me was I wrote a lot of that from having a great principal, but I also wrote about some of the things that I did, you know, as a school principal. Allison Apsey, who kind of co-authored and led the charge on this, she had been a principal for much longer than I, so she shared some of her experiences, the data behind what's important. But I think the really unique thing about that book is we asked teachers, we asked principals, former principals, their insights on, we talked about these 5 pillars, like, hey, how do you achieve this pillar? Give us like a practical strategy and a story with this. But we asked teachers to share if they had a great principal and why it was really important. Because we always talk about like, hey, we need to listen to the people we serve, but then it's always like superintendents writing those books. And it's like totally from a central office perspective or whatever. So I'm like, look, if you really want to know if you're effective, ask the people you serve. So like I would not, there's people I approached to writing that book. And I said, have you ever had a great principal? And they're like, nah, I haven't. I'm like, all right, well, you're out. like we don't, because that book would be easy. Like, hey, don't be this person, right?
Yeah.
So it was really important for us to show like, hey, this is why this person was great and what they actually had done for them from the perspective of a teacher. And actually, as we were like going through it and reading it, it was, to be honest with you, when I read it, I was like, I wish I had this book. Like, there's just things that I never really thought of as a principal. Like one of them, I remember, and I apologize, I can't remember her name. I can see her face. She has a pretty big following on TikTok actually, and she always goes, hello. Oh, it's Abby. I had to like work my way through it. Abby Ramos Stanutz. And she's like, hello, teachers. And I approached her. And one of the things she said was she had a new principal. And she just kind of, as an aside, like she didn't even really write the chapter. She goes, and by the way, just, there's like a trauma that teachers experience when they actually have a new principal. So maybe we could talk about that another time. And I was like, oh my God, like that is kind of true. That's a true, like when you're like kind of things are going well, and even if they're not going well, at least you know what's going on.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you just get someone new and you're like, okay, what's going to happen here?
Yeah.
And I guess I had kind of experienced it, but she just said it. And then I was like much more aware of it than I had been before. And that was really, so like if someone's reading that going into a school, brand new, and they're like, oh yeah, I better like, just that little thing. Like,
yes.
Yeah, and it was like, oh, like that was like a smack to me when I read that. I was like,
not even acknowledging that you are a new presence that they need to get used to. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it's actually funny because I saw one of the questions that you shared, and you mentioned about, like 10, 15 years ago, what are the things that you would do maybe differently? And I know this is going to be weird. I probably wouldn't do anything differently in this sense. I always get to ask this question, like, what if you were a principal today? What's the first thing you would change, right? And it's the same answer 15 years ago. It's nothing. I would change nothing in a school. My role as a principal is to come in there and understand, who am I serving? What are they good at? What do they have access to? And not to change them, but really to kind of understand the culture of what is happening in this space already. What are people good at? And I give this very practical, like it's almost like a little too practical because it's very meticulous. I'd say I would literally actually have, this is what I didn't do. I was cognizant of this, but I wish I would actually done this very methodical way. I said I would actually have a spreadsheet with every staff member's name on the spreadsheet. And then I would have a column to the right of it. And I would have, what is their strength? Like, what are they really good at? And I'd be able to identify it. And what I share with people is that not only do you need to know what their strength at and what they're really good at, they need to know that you know as well. And how important that is. Because if you're going into a new school, and this is a mentality for many people, if you go into a new school and people think you're trying to fix them, they are going to fight you nonstop. But if you go into a new place and you can show how much you value what they're already doing and value the stuff that they're doing, and you're there to kind of help grow it, they'll support you in that premise. And I think that to me is something that a lot of people go in with an agenda. They go in with like, here's my vision, here's where we're going to go, here's what we're going to do. And it's like you're saying like, hey, let's do this together, but also like I had no input on this. I had no say on this at all. And so I think that to me is really, really important. And I don't think that answer will change 15 years from now if you're effective in that role. Like you should know what people are good at and build on it too, because like it doesn't serve people well. And like I wrote about this in Innovator's Mindset, and I don't know, like, you know, where you were in education at this time. You know, that book came out 10 years ago. There was an article in an Ontario newspaper, and it said, I can't remember the exact title, but it was something like this. It said literacy scores go up in Ontario while numeracy scores go down. Okay. So that's like, so it's like says, hey, we're good at literacy, bad at numeracy, right? Or like it was like math, whatever. Okay. So then in the article, it is like teachers suck at math, teachers suck at math, teachers suck at math, teachers suck at math. It mentions literacy 0 times. So not once does it mention literacy. Okay. So it says in the headline, we're good at this, but it doesn't talk about it at all. So then what happens is in Ontario education, all these districts, you know, oh, we suck at math. We like really suck at math. So what do? Every district has to have math in their plan, their school improvement plan, right? So then that goes from the directors of learning or director or whatever, because it's different in Alberta versus Ontario, to their like superintendents, to their principals. Principals are like, we suck at math. You need to fix your math. You get better at math. So it's like you're hearing from the media, you're hearing from your director, you're hearing from your superintendents, you're hearing from your principals. And they're like, why are teachers like so dissatisfied with the profession? Because you constantly are telling them they suck, right? Yeah. So my argument in that was, I'm not saying don't address the math stuff at all, okay? The first thing we should have said, why are we so good at literacy? Like, what are we doing there? Like, what are we doing there? Why are we so good at this? Why are we excelling in this area? And is there anything that we can learn from how good we are at literacy and apply it to maybe improve some of the things that we're doing in math? And that to me is like, that's the missed opportunity there. It's like educational whack-a-mole. There's always gonna be an area you can get better at. But we always focus on that instead of like, hey, we're really good at this. This is like, we are so good at this. Let's talk about this more. Let's focus on this. And so there's actually, I talk about this. I think it's Tom Rath, Strengths Fighters, and basically he says when you actually focus on nothing, basically nothing gets better. Like if you don't focus on strengths or weaknesses, if you focus on weaknesses, things might get a little bit better. But if you focus on strengths, they get exponentially better. So that's the mentality there, is really kind of focusing on what are people really doing well. And what happens is that they don't just get better at the thing they're already doing well. They get better at the thing they're not doing well because they feel like, you know, hey, like I'm actually pretty good, right? If you constantly, hey, George, you lost a bunch of weight, but you could, you know, probably do this, you know, like, why aren't you playing basketball? Like, I would be deterred, right? But like when I'll tell you, the other day, I've been traveling for speaking, and you know, like I'm not eating as healthy then too, and stuff like that. It's not like I, you know, got all my weight back or anything like that, but I'm feeling like a little gross. So I've been really focused on it. And someone said to me, man, you look great. And that, you know what? That like made me work 10 times harder. Right? Because I'm like, yeah, I'm going to keep this up. Right? If Dave said, like, you know, I guess there's sometimes when, you know, I know you mentioned David Goggins, like, you know, crying like a little baby and stuff like that. There's like, you know, but that typically that doesn't last very long. But like for me, when you compliment me on something, I'll hit it way harder.
100%. I find my old principal, we called those fat guy moves. He's like, whenever you like do something crazy, like we talked about stories about like eating 12 donuts in a sitting or whatever, but which has happened to me, or which I've done, I should say. But we would talk about like once you actually turned it around, it's like it wasn't actually being in the negative that motivated you to change. It was actually once you started doing something positive and that was recognized, it actually made you work exponentially harder at that positive. It's not like, oh, I've gained weight, now I want to work out. It's like, no, I'm feeling better, so I'm going to go even harder.
Yeah, totally.
That's kind of
Yeah, and that's like, I know I talk a lot of sports, but I find a lot of connection between coaching and teaching and leadership. Phil Jackson is considered the most successful coach of all time. Now, he had great players, right? Like he had Michael Jordan, he had, Kobe and Shaq, like some of the best players of all time. One of the things that he did really, really well and doesn't get credit for, because Michael Jordan didn't win without Phil Jackson. So Michael Jordan was still Michael Jordan, but he wasn't Michael Jordan until Phil Jackson showed up. One of the things that Phil Jackson did really, really well is he made sure that everyone knew basically what they're really good at and what that strength contributed to that team. So like if you were the 12th person on that team who was never going to see time, your role and what you were meant to be good at was to really push Michael Jordan to maybe like hammer him in practice, give him a hard time. So then you actually saw when the team does well, that's what do it. And like he would do like little things. And I try to like emulate some of these things. He would buy like books for every player based on what he thought the player would benefit. Not like, hey, we're all reading this book together, which is like notoriously a thing that school principals do all the time, right? It's like, hey, this person maybe doesn't necessarily need this book, but I know they'd benefit. I know they'd have interest of it. So then it shows that you actually know the person and you're trying to bring out the best in them, not just saying like, we want everyone to do all the same thing. And so I think that to me was some of that philosophy of like trying to bring out the best in individuals so that we together as a team, like that's the same thing with, Archie hiring me, myself hiring Cheryl. You're looking at like, hey, this person brings this to the table. How do we bring out the best in them? And so that as a team, we all do better, right? It's not everyone doing the same thing. It's everyone contributing something that maybe the other person doesn't have. And I think that's the mentality. Not only like if you really kind of focus, if you're constantly telling teachers you suck at math, what are they going to start doing? They're going to start hammering the kids because there's an emphasis on this. So if you start focusing on the strengths, what are the teachers more likely to do? Focus on what the kids are really good at. And that's like, it's always to me like a trickle down thing, right? If the way I treat my staff, the way I treat the people that are closest to kids, they're going to eventually start teaching kids on that because they'll feel that pressure, right? Like when I hear, oh, teachers are teaching to the test, right? Well, because all you show is the test scores. So like, that's all you're going to show. They're going to start teaching the test because you're saying this is the only thing that matters. Like you're always articulating this, right? Like I've seen so many superintendents, principals, like beginning of the year, like, hey, great to see you back. So let's talk about our data. Here's where we sucked last year. We really need to pick this up, right? And I can see the guilt. You're like, yeah, that totally happened. And so it's like, why? Oh, I wonder why. Like, and go get them. Have a great year. Just a reminder, you kind of suck.
Well, and I also, it's interesting that you make that connection of, we almost think that it ends at the teacher, where you're seeing them go into we're kind of hammering on them like you suck at numeracy, but it's almost like I don't want to speak too generally, almost made the kids also believe that they're not good at it.
Totally.
You know what I mean? It's almost that, and I think the kids are starting to believe that. And where it kind of starts with the parents and the media, and then it comes down to the students actually don't believe they can learn, which I think is an underrated problem for almost every school that I've been in, for sure. Because there's the kind of conceptual loss of confidence, I would say, in teachers and the public institution of education anyway. But like we're still showing up to them every day. We're still doing it. We're still doing the thing. We're trying to do it, but then everyone kind of has this weird, what are we doing here mentality, when realistically, a lot of the things we've always been doing are still working. If that makes sense.
And that's totally. And I think that to me is, I've been guilty of this, and I bring it up often. You say, our traditional teachers. And and like, I don't just say traditional teachers, I say it like that. Traditional teachers. And I've caught myself like, is traditional teaching bad? Like, is it bad, or am I talking about bad teaching? Because like, that's what I'm focusing on, is bad teaching. And so like one of the things I talk about all the time, for me to get my ideas to people, I often do it through story. So if you think about that, that's a way of me teaching. Storytelling is literally the oldest teaching practice in the world. So I'm actually doing one of the most traditional practices ever. My issue has never been, even though I poorly articulated in the past, has never been traditional teaching. It's bad teaching. So if you go to the other end of it too, sometimes we do new stuff because it's new, not because it's good. Right. So we get excited about something, we try something, and we're like, oh, we're doing this latest thing. But it doesn't mean it's good. Right. So that to me is one of the things that I really focus on is like, it doesn't really matter the generation the idea came from. It matters if it works or not. And like, we should always ask the question, does this still work? Is this still actually making an impact? And if it does, and I always say as teachers, you're going to hear a lot about innovation and stuff like this, but I'm not against tradition. What I am against is doing stuff just because we've always done it. So if you're doing something that really works for kids, then keep doing it. Keep doing that thing. But you always have to kind of like ask yourself and challenge the new stuff too. If you don't see it's working for kids, but don't challenge it because it's new. Challenge it whether it works or not. It's the same thing. Don't challenge something because it's old. Challenge whether it works or not. So I think that to me is some of the discouraging. You look at a lot of the frustration that teachers have. And this is, like you kind of go back, at the beginning of the podcast, you said like, I have a focus on leadership. And I really, really do to me, because there's a lot of issues. And I know this from seeing so many different staff, but also creating some of these issues myself. Right. So one of the things that we do in education is we are always trying to be on the cutting edge, trying to do new stuff. So it's like, new initiatives, these 3 things. Hey, we got these 3 things. Well, what about the last 3 things? Like what's going on there, right? Like, are we done with those? Or are we like,
I still need the spreadsheet for that last one? No. Okay.
Right. So here's the example for me. When my first year principal, I want people to really embrace technology. We see like real power in this and how we collaborate, connect and stuff like this. So you go to like a big tech conference, whether it's in the US, it's, in Asia, wherever. There's always these sessions that are jam-packed, right? Which doesn't mean they're good, as we go to them.
Yeah.
100 tools in an hour. Like, and you're going to see this right now. 100 cool things you can do with AI, right? So it's like bombard. We give as many options as possible, whatever, right? So Barry Schwartz talked about actually the paradox of choice. The more choice we have, the more miserable we become, right? Because it actually, we always kind of question, like, are we doing the right thing? So I always saw those being really packed. So my first year as a principal, every month we'd have a staff day, and I would do this thing because I want my teachers to really to embrace some of these ideas. Here's 10 tools you can use in your classroom. Here's how, right? Go real quick. What did I do the next month? Hey, here's 10 new tools, right? What did I do the next month? Here's 10 new tools. They're like, geez, like how many tools are there? So, 10 meetings, 100 tools later, what happens? My staff is like, sucks. Like, I hate technology more than when this guy first came here. Right?
It almost makes you feel like
you're always picking wrong.
There's so much I'm not using that could be better. Like, there's so many tools out there. Like, what am I doing wrong? I'm doing everything wrong because there's so many tools. Yeah.
So the second year I'm there, I said, you know what? Like, hey, my approach is off. Like, this is not working. So we've actually created a team, and our team has decided on these 3 tools. Okay. And the tools, what we're going to do over the next 3 years, this is it. This is what we're doing. We're not going to go out of this. If you want to go out of this as an individual, you can. I don't want to say don't check out other tools, any of this stuff, but as a school community, we will not provide any professional learning on this. We will not on anything outside of these 3 things. We are going to know this inside out. We are going to be so good at this stuff that it's second nature to you, because you don't ever like pick up a pencil because it's like drilled into you and go like, how do I use this again? Like, how does this one work? It's just like, you just do it. Right. And then what was beautiful about that process is, like, again, old guy talk, the whole mentality when Microsoft Word came out, and this really kind of shaped me. Like, we're only using it to 10% of its capacity, right? Like, there's so many things you can do with this, which is true. You actually and 10% would be pushing it, right? Yeah. There's no way you're even using 10%. But if everyone's using the exact same thing, but your 10% is different than my 10%, and then someone else's 10%, but we're all using the same thing, then the percentage of the community starts to go up, right? We all start using it to it. But if you're using Google, this person's using, Microsoft Word, this person's using this person's using this, then you're not getting the capacity of anything. So we wanted the person across the hallway to know that they're using this. And this is like why do we do the tool all the time? And I actually know the answer to this, because we want teachers to have autonomy, right? So what happens is we want to create a portfolio. This teacher used Google Sites, this teacher used WordPress, this teacher used EduBlogs, this teacher does this teacher does that. So the kid is kind of doing kind of the same thing in every class, but with a different tool, and they have to learn the tool, and then they go to the new teacher and they got to learn the new tool because that tool is a little bit different. So I'm like, listen, we have made this decision as a school community. You're all going to use the exact same thing, because now when the kid's doing it for 3 years, you don't have to show them how to use the tool because they've been using it in every other class. It's just go deep. It's just about
doesn't overwhelm the students either.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so like, you are the most anti-technology person. You don't understand what's going on, but you know that everyone's using the same thing. So all you have to say to the kid is, hey, put that in your portfolio. And you don't have to say like, you go like this, do this, do this, do this. The kid just does it because it's like, this is what we do throughout the school. So it's like kind of saying like, hey, it's not about the autonomy of the tool. It's the autonomy of what you put into the portfolio, like what you're creating together. And that's what we wanted to create. We wanted that where it just, we weren't wasting our time trying to chase the latest thing. And my staff were so relieved. And I think part of it at that time, I remember going to a staff, and I remember like I asked this question like kind of arrogantly, like kind of trying to prove a point. I'm like, listen, if I could like let you use whatever you want and you could do that, or I just pick 3 tools for you, what would you pick? They're like, just tell us what to do. And I was like, oh, that was not the answer I was expecting. But it made sense. They're like, it wasn't just like, just give us 3 tools. It was, give us like 3 things and then show us what to do. Like, give us like meaningful things to do with this. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. That actually, the whole like, let's do everything doesn't work. And it's that, so that was like, so that was from my own experience of like, God, like I'm creating a mess here. Like this is not getting my people. And so we like, one of the things I focus on is when we talk about innovation, it's not about doing the newest thing. It's about really understanding what you're doing so well. That's where you start creating something really powerful with it. So you like, I always give the analogy of a jazz musician. The top ones have the ability to like create music just on the spot, improvise, do something really powerful. The reason they have that ability is because they know the basics inside out. They are so good with that instrument that's where they can improvise. But if you like never played a trumpet and just pick it up, you're not just, you're going to improvise.
You're going to make something new, but
yeah, it's going to suck. So that's the mentality is like it should just be, once it becomes second nature, that's when you can go really deep, do some things that you really couldn't imagine before. But if you're always just learning new stuff, then we're just kind of always doing surface level things. And I think that's why teachers are really frustrated. So, the intersection when we talk about innovation, again, going back to the beginning of the conversation, the reason why leadership is so crucial to this is we're constantly asking teachers to be innovative, to get our kids to be innovative, but then we're always kind of doing the same leadership structures. We're kind of doing the same thing. It's like, no, we have to rethink how we're doing stuff to put our people in the position to be successful in this, to actually really kind of go deep in their practice, really. And how do we like recreate, like, for example, professional learning experiences? How could that look for a staff? Are we just saying like, hey, hour talk, 10-minute break, go pee, grab a snack, come back. Let's write stuff on giant pieces of paper that no one's ever going to read again. That kind of stuff, right? So it is really kind of rethinking that. I can see, like, I can tell that you're like, oh my God, this is like.
No, I literally just shared like a picture on my Instagram story the other day, and it was like when you're first week back to school, you have 3 PD days, and you're sitting next to the history teacher, football coach about big sheets of paper of how to change education, and it was someone just laying down on the driveway while it was raining. It's totally. still pretty common practice, but
yeah, and it is, and it's why is it like that's the thing?
I don't know.
Like even there's a meme. It was like risky. So I presented at FETC last year. Yeah. And I started off with this. And it was funny. I said, good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm like, come on, you can do better than that. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. And they're like, good morning. I'm like, so first of all, probably a bunch of you hate me right now for making me do that, right?
100%.
So I actually showed them So as soon as I'm doing the second good morning, I actually I have like, I click to my next slide. And the next slide is like, while this is happening, it said, there's like a meme that said, as soon as a speaker says, good morning, everyone, I immediately hate that person. So I actually, while they're doing it, that meme comes up and they all start laughing because they can see I'm like doing this. I'm like, so why do we do this? Like, why were you like not shocked that I did it? Because I hated doing this. Like, this was embarrassing for me. It gave me like discomfort because I hate.
Good morning, superintendent.
Yeah, I would never do that, right? So, but some of you will see, and like, this is an embarrassing thing, that they had a different keynote, and so I never saw the keynote the morning, and they totally did that exact thing. So then they thought it was like actually like criticizing,
making fun of that person.
I had no clue that it happened. So I was like, oh crap, man. But I said, the thing is, a bunch of you will actually become speakers. You'll be in the position I am, and you'll do this exact same thing to other people, even though you hated it being done to you, because we think we just need to replicate it. And I was like, no, like, you don't need to do that at all. Like, you don't actually need to do these things. And so this is part of like, when we talk about some of the things we're doing in education, that singular meme, someone posted it.
Yep.
And then you could see all the comments going, oh my God, I hate this. This is so stupid. I hate when people do this to me. And someone just saying it actually brought it to attention. But like, we all kind of hate it. Like, and I'll give you another example. You probably, icebreakers. Dude, I hate icebreakers. They're so uncomfortable. They don't make me like anybody more.
George, even when some of the questions like I'll write out for podcasts sometimes, I've started to learn that if I hate myself while I'm writing them out, I probably shouldn't ask them. So even the one about you, when I asked, oh, like, what would you do differently compared to 15 years ago? Like, it's so, I feel like everyone is growing tired of the same questions.
Totally.
And that's why I like your emphasis on innovation, because I find in education there is very little disagreement over what we should be doing. Yet we all still do the same things and everyone hates it. Yeah. So why does that persist?
Yeah, I think honestly that's kind of part of my role, is to kind of come in and go like, hey, why do you do this? Like, I actually I will say, so when I go into a district, it's rarely the teachers, because they don't have the budget to bring me in. Like, it's not their decision. It's like a superintendent or, sometimes it's teacher union, whatever. Right. And I say to them, so just so you know, I'm going to kind of go at you too. You're like,
yep.
And part of the reason I do this is because I want everyone in this. First of all, I don't want anyone to think I'm a mouthpiece for you. I'm not a mouthpiece for you.
Yep.
I am actually here to advocate for kids having the best opportunities for learning and supporting the people that are closest to kids. So that's my role. So I'm going to challenge you a little bit, because I'm also going to challenge teachers a little bit. And so if they only see me challenging them, they're going to be like, oh, this guy's just doing what the admin has told him to. So like, I'm not saying like you're all up for challenge here, and really kind of, creating some of that discomfort, some of that too, but then questioning things. And one of the things I keep hearing over and over again is like, thank you for saying what needed to be said. Like that. And I'm going to go super hardcore Canadian on you.
Please.
Okay? You're going to love this. I don't know if you know this, okay? So you kind of asked, I saw like one of your questions, you just like, kind of like, what's your role? And I try to explain this to people, but only Canadians will understand this, okay? You remember the TV show, The Littlest Hobo?
Which one?
The Littlest Hobo. Oh my God. If you don't know this.
I don't know it. Oh, I'm devastated.
Oh my God.
Not a true Canadian, clearly.
It's such a Canadian show. Okay. So it is like, I think it was CTV. You know, like how there's, like, if you watch all the shows
like
on
CBC programming. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Canadian content.
You can tell which one's like, it doesn't have to say, but you're like, this one was like made in.
This is publicly funded.
This one was made in Moose Jaw. You can tell. So, man, I can't believe you don't know the Littlest Hobo. I'm a little heartbroken now. Okay,
I'm a little heartbroken, dude.
So the Littlest Hobo is it's a German Shepherd. Man, so many, so many people that heard this, they're thinking less of you right now because there's like a whole song with it. There's a voice keeps on calling me. Like the theme song is amazing. Like go look it up after this.
I will.
So the German Shepherd is like this stray dog, right? And he like goes into these towns and like they're like, oh, there's Billy. Like they always give the dog a different name, right? Because it's a stray dog. Nobody knows like the dog's name. So then, all of a sudden, there's a fire in someone's house. And then the German Shepherd goes in and saves everybody and like pulls them out. And they're like, oh, that dog. And then at the end of every episode, the Littlest Hobo is like walking. They're like, where's Billy going? They're like, oh, he's off to help like another school. It's like my job is to kind of come in, kind of like go like
put out fires and then go to
and then just kind of like go off to the next school. Like, cause you're, but the town is hopefully the town is better because of that. They're like, you know what? I actually don't hate you. Like you're not the worst person. And so that totally fell short because
I'm sorry.
I can't believe.
I know.
That's like that Littlest Hobo is like classic CTV.
I'll find it on the CBC programming after this.
Like, listen, you can and it's funny because you can tell like what's a CTV show and a CBC show. Like it's a CTV show. It's 100% a CTV. Like they use different cameras or something. They're like, here's the CBC cameras, here's the CTV cameras. Do you know Degrassi or?
Yes, yeah, I know.
Right. Just check.
I do know Degrassi.
I don't know. Because I don't know what generation are we on? Degrassi the future now? Like,
yeah, I don't want to tell you how old I am because it'll.
The next generation, you're a Degrassi Next Generation kid. There you go.
I think so. Yeah.
Well, actually, one of my favorite moments of all time was, isn't that the kid from Degrassi? This Drake guy?
Drake.
I was like. And,
I did live through that. So
if you go listen. Because there was the old Degrassi, they like had a band and they sucked so hard. It was so bad. And then so just by default, when Drake's rapping, because it's like more modern. So now, of course, one of the kids is a rapper. You're like, oh man, this sucks. And it's like because you're like just in the mentality that any song from
like this is a CTV kid who's just trying to like
go watch Drake actually rap in old Degrassi. And it's like, actually, it's pretty good. This is pretty good. I can see why he became Drake. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Jimmy Brooks.
Yeah. And so, but now that you're like in the consulting game, I guess, like what is your what made you want to be a consultant? Like how does that opportunity even, like how do you go from principal in Alberta with like this ed tech and then now I'm living in Florida, running all the time sometimes, and then consulting and going town to town.
It's funny. So I used to like go to conferences, see speakers. I'm like, that's pretty cool. But I don't know what it was. I never actually connected that was a job. Like I never connected that somebody did that. I didn't understand. Like I didn't know that. Right? So I remember when I was in school, I really try to understand like how do we use some of these technology tools. Weirdly enough, I was actually super against technology because I saw a lot of kids being dumped into computer labs. The computer would basically do the thing, like the whatever. The teacher would be marking. I'm like, these kids are like, they're not doing anything. They're just, and it's like a prep period. There's nothing really powerful here. So I don't know if this is a good thing, right? So then, my brother, Alec Couros, I don't know if you're familiar. He got me really into this stuff. And I started like, okay, I'm going to kind of start playing with this stuff. I'm going to kind of see, is there any benefit to this? So I actually started using Twitter a long time ago. And I was actually sharing stuff that was going on in our school. And it was basically just to kind of show like, hey, here's some stuff. Like it was mostly show our community, things like this. Then all of a sudden, it was like a very different time on social media. Like people were nice to each other. Very different than now. But it was like people were seeing stuff that we were doing all over the world. And then all of a sudden it was like, hey, can you come speak at our school? I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, yeah, you should come speak. I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I could. And they're like, oh, what's your fee? I'm like, you're going to pay me to do that? So like, I actually didn't even know it was a job. And then all of a sudden people started doing this. And then I started, and I'm very comfortable speaking, obviously, like, I don't know how long this podcast, probably like 45 minutes over your time. So
I don't have a time. Don't even worry
yeah.
about it.
So it just kind of progressed into, and I was very blessed to the school district I was in. They were very visionary in the sense that, hey, like, he's getting this opportunity to do this, and but he's probably not going to do it full time. So like, let's support him, and he can also work here. And I remember, like, the vision for our school district time was like, we want to help learners, not students, learners. And I really emphasize this, because learners is anyone willing to grow. That includes adults, that includes teachers, that includes custodial staff, like any of our support staff, and doing that too, right? So, like, how do we help learners achieve their dreams? And I remember, like, kind of get some pushback, like, I don't know if you should speak. I'm like, well, let's look at the vision. Let's look at the vision here. Doesn't it say learners? Am I a learner? They're like, yeah. I'm like, this is one of my dreams. Like, so how are you supporting me in this process? It's like, all right, that's fair. I remember that. So then it was like, I was still working in the school district, and I went 0.9, 0.8, 0.5, 0.2, and then took a sabbatical, wrote Innovators Mindset. Was going to spend the year doing it. Took me about a month, and it was out like 4 months later, because it was interesting, because I actually had such an easy time writing it, because I just pulled stuff that I've been writing about on my portfolio that I only learned to create because I wanted to teach students how to do it. So I just said, I can't teach kids this if I don't understand it from the viewpoint of a learner. So then after Innovators Mindset came out, then that was kind of it. I never went back to the school district. And so I just kind of fell into it. And I don't know, like, we moved to, most of my work is in the US now. And I joke, but it's a little bit true. There's something about accents, right? Like, I have a Canadian accent. So, like,
this Greek Canadian accent.
Right, totally. So they, you go. This is one of the most frustrating things for school districts everywhere. I can go in there, say something that's been said by the superintendent 100 times. They're like, that Canadian guy, and they're like, I've been saying this for like whatever. So sometimes you just got to hear from someone else who maybe frames it a different way. It sounds a little bit different than the person, because then it's not like, and I had the same thing. We had people come into our district saying stuff very similar to me at the time. They're like, that's a great idea. I'm like, I know, I've been telling you that forever. Right. So that's kind of how that, that kind of started. And I saw one of your questions, and I thought it was interesting. Is like, how do you kind of, it was like something about like relevance to teachers. I actually, and this is very important to me, I don't ever tell anyone how to teach. That is not my role. I don't say, like, you should do this in your classroom, anything like this. Because first of all, I don't care how long you've taught. I don't care if you're teaching right now. I don't care if you taught 100 years ago. I don't like being told what to do. Do not tell me what to do. So if I don't like being told what to do, I'm not going to go and tell anyone else what to do. So my viewpoint that I share is just from a learner. I'm like, here's stuff I've learned. Here's stuff I've done in my classroom. But at the end of the day, I want you to understand this. You're the expert. And I think this is a really important aspect. I'm just a person sharing ideas with you, but I don't know your community. I don't know some of the stuff you're dealing with. I can give you some ideas. You create the solutions. So that is a really important aspect for me. And I honestly think sometimes just outright saying that, people are like, okay, I'll listen to this guy. Because like immediately setting the standard is like, I don't want to tell you what to do. I don't want to tell you what to do. And in fact, think about this, is how do we deem this as a successful day often? And this is that challenge thing. We got a bunch of stuff we can do Monday with our class. Like, that's how we'll deem if it's successful. So I make this point. So you want me to tell you exactly what to do on Monday, and that's how you deem it successful. Do you know any other group of people in the world who hate being told what to do? It's like, tell me exactly what to do, but also don't you dare tell me what to do. Like, it's literally the same group of people, right?
Yeah.
So my hope is that you just kind of get some ideas and you create your way forward. You actually figure out like, hey, I kind of like what he did there. I don't necessarily totally agree with this approach or this, so I'm going to tweak this. I'm going to change this. I'm going to alter this, but really kind of seeing it from the viewpoint of a learner. So my whole emphasis that ultimately the people that I'm talking to, how do you get to see yourself as a solution, that you don't need me? I know it's a weird way of thinking,
Yep.
but it's people saying that outright because it is like, I don't understand the community. I don't understand what's going on here. I don't understand that. And for me to pretend that, but even having the conversation, sometimes, you ask like, well, like, what would you do in a school district? I have no clue. I have no clue because it's the same thing. I don't know what they need. So like, I'll get people, people are like, hey, we'd love for you to come speak. You know, like send us
Well, and I guess
information.
that's kind of what I'm wondering. So I'm just thinking, okay, say
Yeah.
hypothetically,
Yeah.
someone says, Lucas, we'd like you to come speak to our district. I'm like, what would I say to these people? Like, I wouldn't have the first clue.
So the thing is, that's what I like. I don't say, here's what I talk about.
Mm.
I like get on the phone. I'm like, what do you need? Like,
Yeah.
so like, why are you reaching out to me? Why are you reaching out to me? What have you seen of mine? What is beneficial? What do you need in your district? And so part of it too is like kind of understanding who they are and what they need. And sometimes, and I know this sounds really weird. Sometimes they'll say, we need A, B, and C. I'm like, I actually, that's not me. I'm not that person at all. So, but do you know who would be really good at that? This person. And so that, I know this sounds weird. That gives me a credibility with that district that when they do need the thing that I do provide, the things I talk about, they're like, well, he's going to tell us the truth. Like he's going to be honest with us. He's not going to, because I would never want to go in to a school district and pretend I'm safe. I'm very, I can tell this. I've been doing this long enough. I hate what I call trend chasers. That do you know what AI developed quicker than anything? AI consultants. There's so many people that are like AI consultants that I'm like, I've never heard you talk about this ever before, like ChatGPT. So like now you're an expert in AI. Where did this come from? Right? So do I ever talk about AI? I talk about learning AI. I talk about some of my approaches, but I don't ever say like, you should use this, you should use this, you should use this. This would be perfect in your classroom. It's like, hey, here's some of the things that I've seen. Here's some of the things that are progressing. How would you use this? Here's some of the things, like, for example, I just did a book review on Hidden Potential by Adam Grant.
Okay.
So I did a book review on it. I talked about my insights of things, but then I actually say like, hey, so I did this in my podcast. I actually asked ChatGPT for a 5 tweet summary of the book. So I'm going to read that to you. So here's why do I do that? Because I'm referencing ChatGPT. So I'm saying like, this is not mine. I actually use artificial intelligence. So I'm doing this too. And then I actually talk about, hey, this quote resonated with me. Here's why. Here's like a story from my experience on why it resonated. Here's actually a connection to innovator's mindset that actually really connected to this. So part of it, again, from the viewpoint of a learner. So I'm not telling like an English teacher, you need to use ChatGPT. What I'm trying to say is like, hey, like if you're writing an essay and you actually, instead of saying, don't use ChatGPT, you say, hey, I watched George use it this way. He actually explicitly shares that he used it. So now there's no like, don't use it, but they're going to kind of sneakily use it. Cause like when you say don't use something, I kind of want to use it more. You're saying, here's how to progress this. Right. So that's where I'm like, that's what I'm always trying to figure out this stuff. Like the interesting thing is the pathway that I fell upon to was not intentional at all. People knew my work only because I started a portfolio because I was saying, how do we do this with kids? I have no clue how this works. I can't teach kids this. I can't teach my staff this if I don't actually go first. So I started my own portfolio. I'm like, this is actually kind of awesome. Like, this is really pushing my learning. And then all of a sudden people are like commenting from like all over. Like I actually got a request to speak in Kazakhstan yesterday. Like I'm going to Thailand at the end of the month. And that people just reading this, and I'm like, this is opening up doors that I didn't even know existed. So what I fell upon accidentally, I'm trying to intentionally teach students and staff how to do this themselves. And so I think, you can kind of tell, like, is someone doing this to try to get gigs, or are they actually passionate about learning? Because there's like, there's like branding, and they have a team, and they have this. I just share learning that I do, and people are like, oh, like, we'd love for you to talk about this. I'm like, all right. That's interesting too, right?
I find that can be especially in education, because I've had the same thought process of like why did I start a podcast? Is it
Right.
it's to try to find the holes in the things I didn't learn before. And I feel like that needs to be something that you go into. But again, there's always this balance of what are the trends, but you don't want to be the trendy person. Like you want to actually try to cultivate something original where you're not just kind of repeating the same things for the sake of an algorithm picking you up.
Right. Right. And that is, and the thing for me is that I believe that the way I talk about innovation is just about doing new and better things. That actually will never be irrelevant. Like you're always going to try to progress, grow, but it really is about being a learner. So like, I don't know what it is. I like to say I'm not a resolution guy, but seemingly every January I try on some new thing and I don't know why. It's just like a reset. Maybe it's because of like how my workflow goes. But like this year, I bought my oldest daughter a piano for Christmas. And I bought it because she had an interest in it, but also like I'm 49 years old. I started learning with her how to play piano at 49 years old. And I pick up stuff really quick because I'm like constantly trying to get better at learning. And what's interesting is I played piano for a couple months when I was a kid, and it was like Mary Had a Little Lamb, and I was like, it sucks. Like I hate this because I
also hated piano.
I was 7 years old, and I was like listening to Depeche Mode and The Police, and because I had two older brothers who listen to that stuff all the time, right? So I'm like, this like kid music is stupid at 7-year-old. Okay. So now I like anything I want to learn, I go onto YouTube and I look up like the song name Piano Easy. I always look up the easy version and I'm trying to pick it up. And I don't know if you ever played Guitar Hero or Rock Band.
Of course.
Like, like how they have like you press whatever. So that's how the tutorials are for piano. So like I have like all the keys laid out. So it says which key it is. I have an iPad, I put it up and it just shows me. And I have like some, rhythm, I guess.
Yeah.
So like I can, my like idol is Ryan Gosling. I love Ryan Gosling. so I love Ryan Gosling so much. He is just awesome.
Why? That's so random.
I just love him. He's just so talented. He is so good. And
Remember the Titans, though. I get it.
Right. Remember the Titans. Yeah, that's like so not a Ryan Gosling movie, but it is right.
Yes.
But he like I learned La La Land is one of my favorite movies. It's one of my daughter's favorite movies. So like
I the I Am Ken song, but
I learned I Am Ken. I totally listen. I'm all over that. So I learned all those songs. So I actually can play like I think 90% of the La La Land soundtrack now. Because I could play the Billie Eilish song from Barbie, and what I try to do is I try to be a little bit ahead of my daughter, so I could say like, and I'm like, hey, I know you like this song. Here's how to play it. And now she's like killing me, because she takes lessons, all the other stuff, but she's like has an interest in it, and it's like kind of so talk about learning, right? So why didn't I stick with piano when I was a kid? Because like I can't see the future. I'm not seeing playing Depeche Mode. I'm seeing my whole life as Mary Had a Little Lamb. But now my daughter's way more interested in it because she's playing La La Land songs. She's playing this too, but she's also learning the theory and she's also learning the Mary Had a Little Lamb. So I know I can appeal to her if I can get that. So then, it's kind of like, hey, if you have a kid who's 8 years old, like little George is 8 years old, who's obsessed with basketball, that kid will read a higher level if you get him a basketball book because he'll want to read that book. So now he like sees the purpose and passion in it. So it's kind of like little things like that. So that's why I don't really focus on the teaching aspect. I'm really trying to understand the stuff as a learner. Like even, it's funny. One of the very first things you asked me is about running. I get probably half, if not more of my questions about my health journey now, like not education wise, because a lot of people struggle with it. And they're like, hey, like, how did you do this? Like I had yesterday, someone said to me like, hey, I saw you were on this because I actually use like V-Shred and this thing. And some of those things help me. And they said, hey, would you sign up for this? I said, no, don't sign up for it. Here's what you do. Do these things. Do it for a month. If you stick with it for a month and it doesn't work, I will give you your money back. And it's like, it's a joke because they paid nothing for it. Right? It's like kind of saying like, if it doesn't work, it's you.
Yes.
It's like, if you do these things, I know, because like, it's not going to like if you sign up for this fitness program, but you're not going to do it, it's not going to do anything for you.
You're going to make it a task also. And it's going to be
ready.
a thing on your schedule that you're not, that you're going to hate.
Yeah. So here you go. This is what you do. You do these 3 things for a month. And if you don't see a result, like it's because you're not ready. If you do these things, and the weird thing, it's the simplest thing to do. It's the simplest thing to do if you're disciplined. Like you all know, like calories in, calories out is how if you want to lose weight, that's how it is. It's a very simple formula, but it's not as easy. It's simple, but not easy.
I know my favorite story. I think someone said their professor he ate only Twinkies for a month, but he still lost weight because he was just still under his calorie threshold and just actually trying to illustrate that. I mean,
cheese with sandwiches.
Cheese with sandwiches and homemade bread, man, every day.
Values.
I won't keep you too much longer here, but for I guess what's kind of things looking like forward for you? Like any books, anything that you're kind of what are you still seeing in education that needs some work?
I don't know if there's any
leadership.
Yeah, obviously like I said, I really want to, my focus is always about innovation, really thinking about teaching and learning. But I always just think about how am I progressing? What stuff am I learning about? I'm like one of the most old school people I feel on the internet because I'm like the only one who still consistently blogs, actually writes his own blog. And I've really focused on doing that over the years. And it's not because I'm like, ooh, what's hot right now? What's the SEO gonna gravitate towards? I'm like, oh, what am I interested in? So you'll see I'll blog about health stuff. I'll blog about innovation. I try to blog about books that I'm reading. One of the weirdest things since I moved to Florida, I've read more paper books than I've ever read in my life combined. And really trying to
the opposite when you move to Florida, but
yeah. So I actually really try. I don't know. I just try to because I'm trying to kind of get off of stuff. I'm sure. Here's one book, I've been pushing back on this book a little bit, and I find it's fascinating. Do you know the book Anxious Generation? Have you heard about this, Jonathan Haidt?
I've heard. Okay, yeah, because I read actually The Coddling of the American Mind.
Yeah.
I did read that one,
right? But
I have not read The Anxious Generation. But it seemed almost again pointing out the obvious without really providing a tool for change.
No, there's.
I didn't read that. I didn't read that book though.
There's tools for change, and there's a lot of things that are changing there. And here's one of the challenges I have. So this book is leading, and I want to be very clear on this because this is this is where you could get hate on this for me. So his thing is kids shouldn't have access to phones. Kids shouldn't be using social media. I think he says to either 16 or 18. Schools should ban this stuff.
Yep.
Understood. Okay. So so he talks about some of the issues, which I actually totally agree with.
Yeah.
Some of the issues. Now, am I a big advocate for phones in classrooms? No, not at all. That's not a big thing for me. My focus is how are you actually helping kids, be prepared not only for their future, but for right now. If we're not using stuff right now. And what's really fascinating to me, this book is all over the place. It is everywhere. School districts are buying it. They're just we're going to just agree with this and we're just going to do what this guy says. And it's kind of interesting because it's just been universally accepted. Right?
Yeah.
How do people?
It is kind of those buzz words a little bit, right?
How do people know about the book?
Social media, I guess.
I'm going to benefit. I'm going to benefit from the thing that you should not teach kids how to benefit from. That's where I'm struggling with this. Is so you're getting this message out. You're starting this massive movement against you. And I remember actually one of the comments was a parent's yeah. This is so important. Kids should be using this. I have posted this to the 8 parent Facebook groups I'm in. I'm oh my God. So kids shouldn't use this, but also I can't stop posting about it everywhere. So my whole argument about this is as a what
do you mean by kids shouldn't use this? Shouldn't use what?
Kids shouldn't use social media. Kids should not be using social media at all.
Yeah.
But how am I going to get that message out? By posting it everywhere on social media. So it's kind of the equivalent to me, hey, you know what? Kids shouldn't be driving until they're 18, but when they're 18, Just throw in the key, see what happens. Like that's a little bit of that's a little bit of what's happening.
There's no apprenticeship.
Right. So my whole thing right now is really kind of challenging some of this, and not to be like again, I agree with a lot of the stuff that it's talked about, some of the mental health stuff that's happening in schools, things like that. And again, I'm not like, no, kids should have phones in schools. It's so imperative.
It's almost reactionary in a sense.
Yeah, and so like they're banning this too, but it's like a little bit of an. I know it sounds weird. Like even I think he says this too. He says something about like, this is like heroin, like this stuff. But like if you're an adult, whatever. I'm like, yeah, adults just start.
Yeah, just take heroin.
Right. So I'm like, I don't know if that's so. First of all, do we as adults know how to utilize this? And think about some of the stuff. Like I encourage people, like if you think we're really good at this and we're really good at this, here's a little, try this. Go onto social media and just write on Facebook, Twitter, hey, what do you think about the 2024 presidential election coming up? See how good people are to each other. Just see how they interact. And then you'll see, like, are we as adults modeling what we expect from
actually
kids?
Have fun.
Yeah.
Go out there.
If you want to lose your job. So like that thing too is like, I don't know if as the adults, we're really getting this down. So I don't know if we're the best people to guide our kids, but so I guess there is a very personal struggle for this. And it's not because, I've advocated for kids using this. That's not my personal struggle. It's I've benefited from this. So it's hard for me to say to someone, like, do I see negatives? Absolutely. And I'll give you a really easy example. I'm in way better shape than I was 5 years ago. One of the things I used to do 5 years ago, first thing in the morning, I'm going to work out, right? I'm just going to check my Twitter for like 10 minutes. I'm just going to check it. And then an hour later, you're like in a Twitter vortex. You can't get out of it. Skip it. So what do I do now? My phone is a music playing machine until I'm done my workout. I don't check my email. But there's a credibility that I have with students because they're like, oh, this guy's got like a lot of followers on Instagram. A lot of people follow him. So they like, hey, this guy uses it. But he's also saying, here's when I don't use it. Here's when I put it away. But here's how I benefit from it.
Yeah.
Right. So like going back to an earlier part of the conversation, who do teachers tend to listen to? Other teachers, right? Because there's credibility. So when I talk to teachers, I'm like, hey, I've taught, these grades. I've been vice principal, I work central office, all of a sudden. But if I walked in and said, you know what, I've actually never taught, but I worked at, Apple.
Yeah.
They would be like, who's this guy? Like immediately as soon as, right? So then you have adults saying, you know what, kids, you shouldn't be using this stuff. What are the kids doing? They're like, well, you don't use it, so I'm not listening to you. It's the same credibility issue. So part of it too is I'm not, again, and I'm so cautious about this because I know this is gonna be posted. And so they're like, oh, this guy's all for phones. And I actually, it's funny, CBC contacted me and they're like, hey, we want you to talk about cell phones in the classroom. And I already, I'm not dumb. I'm gonna be the pro phone guy.
Yep.
So then it's like, here's the pro phone guy. No, I'm the nuance guy. I'm the guy like, hey, let's just think a little bit about like, is this now like, hey, kids should never be using technology. Then what?
Well, I guess how would you, because in New Brunswick where I am now and in Alberta where I just left, they just banned cell phones completely in school.
Anxious Generation.
Both places.
Anxious Generation. Look it up. It's going to be connected to that book. I promise you. Yeah.
But I guess my question is like, how would you teach? Like, how are you teaching your own kids how to like use social media? Because you seem to be using it effectively. Because again, you and I never would have connected if it wasn't for social media. I reached out to you
100%, and I think that's part of it too. Is that so? Let's just take a really simple example, right? Mm-hmm. I had a conversation with a communications person just the other day, and they talked about like. I asked them if they Google candidates and they're like, no. And I think they said that because I think they are worried they're going to get in trouble because there's no way they don't. Okay. Mm-hmm. Whatever. And they're going to get in trouble. So I can say it because I don't have an HR team. Like I am the HR team at my district. So let's say you have, so I used to talk about this when I was a principal. I used to look at 3 spaces for you specifically if you're applying for a job. You're going to be in 3 categories once I Google you. If you get to my top 10 is who I'm Googling. Okay. I'm going to interview 4. There's a negative, neutral, positive. Okay. You're posting super inappropriate stuff online. You're out. I don't want anything. Because you know what I know is going to happen as soon as I hire somebody? Parents are going to Google you. So now I didn't do my due diligence. Okay. So now I'm going to look bad if I don't do my homework. It's like not calling your references. Neutral, I can't find anything about you. Like there's nothing. Okay. There's nothing bad. There's nothing good.
Yep.
Positive is like, oh, like look at what Lucas does. Like this is amazing. What a credit to the profession. This is great. So you are getting in the door because of this, right? And part of it too is I am now in a situation, and this is what I want to teach students. I'm not applying for jobs. Jobs are finding me. I didn't ask to be in your podcast. You reached out to me because you see my stuff. You see this. The ultimate is not like, hey, get ready for when you apply a job. It's like, hey, why don't you do good stuff that people say, like, I want to work with this person. I want this person on my team. They start reaching out. They start finding you. So really, how do we actually help our students? How do we help our students actually, when someone Googles them, they're like, wow, look at what this person's doing. Look at all the great stuff that they do. But what happens a lot of times, there was a superintendent I saw speaking, and I thought it was really, really interesting. They said, hey, we got rid of phones in our school, and we have actually seen now, because we've done this, zero incidents of cyberbullying during school hours. I'm like, okay, what about after school hours?
Hey, that's data-driven instruction right there.
Data-driven, right? Yeah, like it's like, so is it we're helping, or we're just saying, yeah, let's just deal. Let everyone else deal with it too, right?
Well,
so
yeah. Now you're saying basically now we don't have to deal with it anymore.
It's not our problem. It's not our problem.
Yeah.
Even though it actually kind of becomes your problem, because if they're like bullying each other after school and it actually makes its way to like a physical fight, altercation during school, like there's actually, I don't know, in Alberta, that actually would be cause for suspension if outside school affected in school. So my concern is like, it's not like we should have phones in classrooms. It's like, hey, are we saying we are now super anti-technology? We're not going to teach our kids any of this stuff, while we're also watching politicians basically act worse than children and be the standard of how we're all about owning each other. Like, oh, my political person own this person, or like this person, or we know how to like kind of like, yeah, you can vote for whoever you want. If you hate everybody, like it's kind of like some of that stuff, right? So and I think there is something I saw, and again, because you have not seen the Littlest Hobo, I'm obviously extremely old in this conversation. I grew up in a time where we were taught, do not talk politics and religion with strangers. And that's kind of been my mentality for like how I use social media. It's a bunch of strangers. Don't talk politics and religion. One thing that really pushed me was I saw a meme, and it said,
it does not make you sound old in the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. I'm actually like, I can get jiggy with it. So it said this: when we were kids, we were taught don't talk politics and religion with strangers. What we should have been taught is how do we talk politics and religion with strangers in a civil manner. And I was like, yeah, like that's what we need to focus on. And I don't know if we are like, it's not, I want kids obsessed with phones. You know, I want kids creating stuff that's meaningful to them. And sometimes that's going to be without a device. Sometimes it's going to be with a device. Are we like closing some doors, or just saying, this is not our issue. We don't have to deal with this. And I know that, you know, teachers want the best environment. I understand that. And I'm not taking a very like hard line stance. I'm just saying we have like the focus is, how do we help kids? It's really hard for me to listen to someone say, you don't use a thing I'm benefiting from using. Because like even where did I read The Anxious Generation? I read 2 books at the same time. Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, which talks about like using the stuff as little as possible. And I read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, which is like kids shouldn't be using phones, all this stuff. Where did I learn about both of them? On social media. Where did I read them both? On my phone, on the Kindle app. If they're so against these things, why even make it available on Kindle? Like what? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Hey, I'm super
against central value
I'm super against it, unless, you know, I make a little money off of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that there's a little bit of that it bugs me. It bugs me because it's like, hey, it's really hard, and like again, it's all about nuance. I think that's we live in a time where it's really important that people take sides. Whereas I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of a middle guy, and I know people hate that too. It's like, no, you got to be on the side. No, I want to kind of figure stuff out.
And it's also okay to be a middle guy that disagrees with something. Like, you don't need to be the other, like, whatever, just because you disagree with one approach.
Right. Like I'm also, there's times when my oldest daughter's on the iPad and she's doing whatever she's doing, and she's like miserable and snappy. I'm like, that's going away. We're done with this right now because I don't know what's going on with you. But you're like a little rude right now. and you can see it, but I know this is gonna be kind of old school. You know what that's called? Parenting.
Whoa.
That's a thing. That's like sometimes I know it's controversial. We don't have free range children, right? So there's sometimes where I'm like, yeah, no, this is not okay. You're not being polite, and then she understands that, and there's like. But I also teach her how to use this too. I see her using it sometimes. Like even one of the, I do these videos. I do these like walk videos after, it's just stuff I'm thinking about. And I don't like, I sometimes will do 3 in a week, and sometimes
that's when those running thoughts are fresh.
Right.
Like,
and what I do, I showed her how to edit it, how I edit it, how I add captions, all this other stuff. I'm teaching her the skills. Yep. So, and I'm teaching her like, hey, I use my phone. Here's I get the video. Here's I use CapCut, blah, blah, blah.
And you're using it positively.
Yeah, like I want my kids. I don't want my kids to be. I also, the beautiful thing is TV was going to wreck everything, and it was like a very consumption thing, right? Mm-hmm. I can understand like the internet is such a different space than TV, so you can't use the same TV internet argument. But I really want to teach not only my kids but all kids, how do you actually contribute? How do you actually add? Because I think it's a lot of like this.
The medium is the message kind of thing.
Yeah, like
all that classic McLuhan stuff.
It's funny. Like my friend, I grew up in Humboldt, Saskatchewan. And
really?
Yeah,
did not. Okay.
Yeah, and so my friends never have said this to me, but they're kind of like, "Why did you become smart? Like, what happened? You are not a smart guy." Like, there's a little bit of that. Like, you wrote a book, multiple books, and I actually really truly believe this. I would have never written anything if I didn't start that portfolio to understand kids. And I was like, you know what? I have to really think about what I'm saying right now because everyone in the world can read this. And so I better be thoughtful. So like it actually challenged me to think of different people's perspectives. Mm-hmm. Right. And one of the things I always talk about is like when you're writing, something online, what you should try to do is take what I call a 360-degree perspective of it. Think about what the argument is going to be against what you're saying and make sure you address it. Because if you don't address it, somebody's going to address it in the comments. Yeah. Right? So I'd rather say like, yeah, I'm not saying this. That's why like even it's like in my, hey, I'm not saying I'm 4 phones in the classroom. So I'm making that very clear. But I want people to understand like, and I'm not like against banning them or it's kind of like I'm trying to address all these things because I don't want to say, oh, because that's what I knew. They're going to say, nope, there's no 360 CBC. We want a dynamic, like, I actually.
George versus.
Totally. And so I knew this because I was on CBC years ago. Or no, I was actually CTV.
In Brighton Moose Jaw.
Different camera lens. And I think it was, she's like, she's I don't even know what it's called anymore. She's in the Liberal cabinet. Marcy Ian.
I think I know who you're talking about.
She had me on and they were like talking about cursive handwriting. And they brought me in. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, I'm going to be interviewed for this. So I'm doing all this technology stuff. So I was brought in as the anti-cursive guy. And I like constantly was like arguing like, hey, I'm not saying get rid of cursive. I'm just saying there's only so much time in a day. Do we teach kids how to like do podcasts and create videos, all this other stuff, right? And it was like, no, you're like anti-cursive. I'm like, I'm not that guy. So then what happens? It's like, screw this George guy. He's an idiot. And then it's like, so that's the internet. So I'm like, I'm not dealing with this. Like, I just don't like, because I want to have a conversation where it's like, no, we got to pit. We're going to have this person. We're going to have this person. We're going to get them to fight, and then whatever happens online, not our problem. So it's just kind of like, no, let's have a conversation. Like, what are we doing as adults? How are we modeling this stuff? Like, again, and I think Jonathan Haidt's a brilliant mind, right?
Yes.
He posts stuff on his Instagram account, and when I say he does, his team does, because he's not posting as much. There's no way. He doesn't have the time. And because he's doing interviews. But there was one I saw that was like, hey, it's Phone Free Friday. I'm like, how are you posting this then? Right?
Like, oh, it's pre-recorded on Thursday.
You actually posting this on Phone Free Friday
is crazy.
And getting people like, yeah, like, I love Phone Free Friday. Me too. And it's like, okay.
Look at this online community of Phone Free Friday.
That's that's where I'm struggling with.
And there's the title for our episode right there. Phone Free Friday.
Yeah.
All right. So, Mr. Couros, I got one more quote for you to unpack. And it's one I always end off the episodes with. And I think it will strike effectively for you specifically because you are kind of in so many contexts speaking all the time.
Yeah.
And it's education is what remains once you've forgotten everything you've learned in school. What is it that you want people to take away from their time with you specifically that they won't get with anyone else?
They won't get, I think that for me, what I would love to see is don't ever take any ideas that anyone shares, including myself, and just assume that they're right or wrong. Take it, make it your own context. And I apologize. That's how long we've been on this podcast, man.
It's all right.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's just kind of take these ideas, take what you share, and create something with them. That's what we want kids doing. Is actually that's where you find the true value of this stuff. A lot of people push back on growth mindset, and I actually think that it's rightfully so, because sometimes I think it's like compliance with another name is like, hey, if you don't agree with me, it's because you don't have a growth mindset. It's like, no, I actually just don't want to skydive. So that's just me. So I think when I talk about the idea of the innovator's mindset, it's not just knowing that matters. It's actually what you do with what you know. It's what you create with it. And I think, what I hope is people posting on this, sharing some of their own insights, sharing some of their own takeaways. And when you do that, it'll become so much better. I'm all about, for example, slow reading. I try to read a book really slowly, capture some quotes, capture some ideas, and then I write about it. Once I write about it, it's like stuck. Now it's mine. Do you know what I mean? Now I've made a connection long term.
I think you almost have to for a book to really mean something.
I'm like, oh, I read like 100 books this year. I'm like, tell me like 3 things you learned. Oh, I couldn't even tell you. Yeah. Right. So I think, takes this podcast, this process, and actually, create your own takeaways and find your own pathways forward, because ultimately at the end of the day, you find your success. And that's what we want to teach kids, is that success will never be determined for you. You define it yourself, and you got to find your own pathway toward that.
Beautiful. I don't really know what's going on with the picture here, but thank you.
Dead, man. Camera's dead.
Okay.